Hi everyone, we hope you're enjoying the Customer Marketing Summit so far. Before we dive back in, we wanted to let you know that after the summit, the amazing content does not stop there. We're heading to New York for our second in-person Customer Marketing Summit, where you'll be able to hear from some of the best customer marketers in the industry and network with your peers face to face. Our lineup features experts from companies such as Google, PayPal, Cisco, and Workday. And if you can't wait until December 8th, our podcast, Customer Marketing Catch-Up, is available to listen to now. You'll get insights from some of the biggest names in customer marketing today. From advocacy and churn to customer advisory boards and cross-departmental collaboration, put your headphones in and listen to your fellow customer marketers' unique stories and advice, all while on the go. I'll be sharing the links in the live chat, but for now, back to the Customer Marketing Summit.
Hi, customer marketers. This is David Soroka, co-founder of Point of Reference, and I'm joined today by Tony Burton, head of customer marketing and storytelling at WalkMe.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. I'm super excited to share on this topic with David.
So I am happy to be presenting around the idea of training your salespeople on customer reference management. The largest population that you're going to support is probably sales, so it makes sense to do it well. And it's also the group that will be able to produce results in the form of revenue influence that'll show the impact of your program. So let's get started. First of all, why do they need reference training in the first place? You would think they're salespeople, they know how to do this, right? Well, formal reference training is rare, first of all, and I think, Tony, you can say that every company you've landed at has not had it.
Yeah, not until I've been there.
So it's not an assumption that it's there. Bad habits are easily learned. People pick up things along the way in their career, and sometimes they're the right things and sometimes they're not. And you want to correct those things if they're the bad habits, which we'll get into in more detail. And then lack of process. If you have people in a very chaotic way trying to find references, secure the use of them, share them, etc., it's a lot of wasted time. And salespeople are, if nothing else, about being efficient so that they can maximize their close revenue and hit their quotas. So, Tony, a few things about this. Removing chaos. What's been your experience?
Yeah, so it's really, it's important to just building credibility within the sellers that what you're here to help them. You help to be their partner in this process, take a lot of the guesswork out for them, come from a point of trying to understand their problems and really enabling them to find something that is repeatable, dependable, and predictable for them. Because like you said, sellers are all about maximizing efficiencies to hit quota. And part of that comes down to a repeatable and dependable process. And whatever you build out for your reference program and process, making that as easy for them to digest and recreate, because they're typically not going to be selling the same, a deal is one-off. They're going to sell similar deals all the time. So having institutional knowledge for them too on what have they done in the past, so they can even save you more cycles, is a key to show your value.
And you do something different in this current company and the one before, not just the mechanics of good reference practices, but also storytelling. Talk about that a little bit.
So really it comes down to just, once again, taking a lot of the complexities out of what is a customer story, what is customer evidence around it, and really breaking it down into the part components of it and understanding, what are our common problems within our customer base, and what then do we translate that to the outcomes that we experience in customers that are successful, and making it easy for a seller to understand how to take a customer story and reuse it a bunch of times. I think that many people get so flustered in trying to digest a customer storybook, like we've all probably inherited like 120 slides, and half of them are outdated or confidential or too many words on the page. So no one's going to read it. No one's going to understand what's going on. So making something very simple, digestible, and translatable makes it very easy, once again, to build in a repeatable process, a dependable cycle for your sellers, as well as you becoming a dependable partner for them with how they can engage with the customer reference program, the customer marketing program, and really tell a good story. Because if you're doing a good job of telling great stories along the process, it can maybe mitigate some of the other issues we'll talk about later on.
Yep, cool. All right, so let's talk about the who should do the training part. Ideally, customer marketers are heavily involved, either delivering or at least defining. And it begins by understanding the sales team and their processes, the sales cycles, the way that they use references, when they use references, the kinds of references they need, where they run into roadblocks, where an advocate can be helpful. That's really the beginning of being a good educator, a good trainer in this case. And they should know you've got their back and they can count on you in a pinch. Maybe that's reactive, like they just got a request, or maybe it's being proactive and identifying potential needs. This goes for all stakeholders, although we're focused mainly on sales today. But it's really helping them understand you're part of the team that is working towards closing and winning opportunities.
Yeah, and to that end, you're going to want to partner with sales enablement or whoever delivers enablement curriculum to your sellers and your customers, your CSMs, whoever's going to be inputting information or taking information out of your program, to really show them the best practices that you've built, the expectations, and really setting the can and cannots of a program. And once again, setting the expectations of when to use appropriate customer evidence and customer references, just make the process a lot easier for them to navigate. Once again, it builds in your credibility as the person who owns the program. I think a lot of that comes down to sellers are typically type A's. So you want to be seen as the alpha of your program, and you want to be the person who's driving that so that they can then come to you as a subject matter expert, which at the end of the day, if you can deliver that and you deliver expectations, you're going to deliver what they want when they want it, because you've set the expectation of when they can have it. When they ask for a customer reference call, you've told them when to request it. It makes it easier for them to find it. And then they trust the process more.
Yeah, the other thing I'd add about sales enablement is they may be the ones that deliver your training ongoing in onboarding. And so that's another reason, of course, to partner with them, is to make sure there's someone who's consistently delivering quality training. The other thing I would say is sales enablement really understands how other training has worked for sales and what has not worked. And they can help you with everything from the timing of it, the length, the format, how to divide different groups. Maybe different divisions within sales need something slightly different from one another. So they really do have a fix on the sales team, and you should leverage that. All right, so let's talk about what training might look like.
So really the end goal of using references is to instill confidence in the buyer and get them to understand that your product can and cannot do. Once again, where you're strong. And what you really need to do is understand from the buyer what they really need and find the best form of reference. You kind of have to read their minds by the sellers knowing what questions to ask, which can lead them down the right road from your enablement to find the right match for the need. Once again, it can eliminate the time to find an answer, which helps sellers not look dumb, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it helps them look prepared, helps them look like they've looked at demand-based information, intent data, and they've evaluated competitor X, Y, and Z on G2 Crowd. So then you can go in with the appropriate complementary customer reference content or a white paper, what have you. So it really helps them put their best foot forward.
I like what you said in an earlier conversation about the wall. Talk about that.
Yeah, it's really all about chipping away at the wall between your company and the prospect, because everyone puts up a wall of guard when you're getting fed information from a potential vendor. So customers and the voice of a customer, gives you a lot more credibility within a buying cycle. I know it does for me. To hear from somebody else, a peer of mine or a company similar to me, even an anonymized version, helps chip away at the skepticism I may have of, is this company going to really partner with me? Is this going to be of value to me?
Okay, so when to use. There's a couple key things that you would teach salespeople if they don't know already. Obviously, there's a point in the sales cycle where it makes sense to use one form of content, or maybe it's a live reference, and you need to really define those stages and make sure that you're not encouraging the use of customers on calls too early, expending your most valuable resource when it doesn't make sense. The probability of closing is still not that high. Buyer signals, you might help them define, and this is, again, why it comes down to understanding how their sales process works, is what are the typical signals? Have they secured budget? Have they gotten the okay from a CTO or a CIO from a technical perspective? What boxes do you check before it's appropriate to involve a live reference? And up to that point, you have recorded or printed or whatever type formatted reference insights. And then there may be certain conditions that you set down. Maybe they have to have gone through a proof of concept first or not. It's all going to be dependent on how your company does things. But certain things need to be in place for it to make sense to offer certainly live references. And it's always important to remember that your customers who act as advocates have day jobs. And so you want to be judicious with how you use them. And make sure that if there's an opportunity to show how they're getting something out of the conversation, that they know that too. So that's a win-win each time. We have a lot of customers that just enjoy talking to others in our field. And so they use that as an opportunity to expand their network, which is cool. All right, let's talk about what type of, I'll put in air quotes, reference to use, because that can mean different things to different people.
Yeah, you really want to understand who the buyer is. If you're working with a developer versus CTO, that's a different kind of driver within the organization. You're looking at data-driven metrics versus pain points. What's the kind of the questions that they're going to ask, or wanting to understand the theoretical implementation of a solution or a change to the organization, if that's what your organization is selling, versus just seeing a solution in action, seeing some sort of live demo in someone else's environment. And once again, knowing the available options for a customer reference, whether that's a case study, a quote, some sort of pre-recorded session from a conference or anything like that, to reference calls, and just understanding what can you serve up and what's going to facilitate that best within the organization that's looking at it. Maybe you can then offer information up proactively. And, that comes from understanding and being in this realm for a long time, is knowing when early stages, it's really validating that someone similar to me works with you and sees results that are positive. And then when you get later in the stages, it's having a direct conversation that answers a lot more nuts and bolts questions. Maybe they've done a POC, or they've done some sort of live touching and testing of your solution, and they're just getting a lot closer to buying. So they have a lot more hard-hitting questions, can only be facilitated with answers via call or even an email chain.
When I think of the non-live references in the sales stages, I think commitment level of the buyer too. So earlier, maybe they're still looking at multiple vendors, and one-page form of reference content is more appropriate. And as you get later in the sales cycle, they're willing to commit more time. So maybe it's an ROI study, or maybe it's an in-depth interview, again, around maybe stats, metrics, and so forth, that like early stage, they would glaze over, but now they're engaged. Now they're narrowing their choices down, and it's time to be more specific. Okay. Let's talk about who to use.
So for me, it's really understanding, once again, your buyer. What are they going to try to glean from the call? What kind of questions can your seller glean from their conversations that the buyer's going to have, that can then help you facilitate who has the right expertise for what's needed? Oftentimes, I think our problem comes through where somebody has 12 pieces of criterion for their reference, and they're just set on it being those 12 things. They want you to find the unicorn who's left-handed and speaks eight languages and stuff like that, and it's not available. So really, what I try to do is help them triage what's important to you. Is this really a specific use case, platform, industry specific kind of question? Maybe they're in banking and finance, and there's a lot of regulation around compliance. Okay, that makes sense that we need an industry. Then that could be platform agnostic potentially, or use case agnostic. So really start winnowing down what is the real crux in the problem that they're trying to have answered, and then finding the right fit and working backwards, see how many of the ideal 12 requirements they do have, and then also knowing like who at your reference account or advocate is going to have the answers to that, because it could be that the buying committee has the CTO and the VP of IT and somebody else on there, but maybe a manager of IT is the person who has all the answers to their questions. You have to position then and get sales comfortable to position the advocate as the expert in their questions, right? So that they don't get caught up on seeing, Bob Boberson, manager of IT, versus Jane Doe, CIO of company X. And I think that helps you just make sure that we want to get you comfortable with your questions or get you the best answers. And that comes from Bob Boberson versus Jane Doe.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of relevant use cases, beyond, yes, they're using these parts of our solution, there may be different use cases. An example I use a lot is take a product like Slack, where it could be used in development, could be used in finance, could be HR, could be sales, all over the place. So you want to be specific to that as well. Otherwise, again, it's not very compelling, and you've wasted someone's time lining them up to only talk about a use case that's not important to that particular buyer. So that kind of translates into the relevancy in terms of solution experience as well. It's knowing that this person was in my shoes 6 months ago, a year ago, whatever, and they're using the solution in such a way that makes sense for me to get past that. I'm not sure this is the right way to go, building that confidence level up again. All right, so that's the how to use. Let's talk now about process, because we're trying to, in this training, And then creating a formal program as well is to try and take this chaotic thing that's happening now around references and put it in a more predictable, repeatable model, operationalized, as I like to say. So talking about the elements, the people that are involved in looking for and using references should know who requests go to and who requests don't go to. The black market thing is like everybody gets involved. It's incredibly inefficient. So you want to narrow that down and have some real points of contact through the process, whether that's you or someone in a different department or using a particular tool, a system. We'll call that a who for this case. You should establish lead time so they have expectations. They know how quickly or how slowly things move and how much lead time they have to provide. It can't always be, I need tomorrow, 4 references. It's just, that's not sustainable. You'll always be chasing your tail. And I would add to this 2-way SLAs. What do you do for me? What do I do for you? I need new candidates from my reference program all the time. That's your responsibility. Mine is to formalize those nominations, if you will, and make them available for use down the road by you and your cohorts.
To that end, I know our CRO now has adopted the 1 in, 1 out. You request a reference, you have to go get me one. So we try to be, I like to call it reference neutral, so we can keep our footprint as static as possible within the program and grow it as the same velocity we're using it. So that's really a good way to look at it as well.
Does that resonate with your sales team, that concept?
Well, we just rolled it out, so we'll see. But I think that they, it's also, he's watching it. So I think that's the other part is we've created a dashboard that shows that, David Soroka has made 3 reference requests and gotten 0 new references. So he needs to go get me 3.
That's right.
We'll see how that goes.
Okay. So also in the request for references, providing the necessary details is important so that there's not a lot of back and forth. You can be as efficient as possible on tracking down a match, or again, if it's through a tool, collecting the right information to pass along to whoever is fulfilling. Respect that relationship protocol, right? So you need to always understand who owns the relationship and not end run that relationship. It can damage the overall impression of your company to that customer who's one of your very best. It can also lead to them saying, hey, rest me for a while. You're bugging me too often. So you really want to count on some sort of gatekeeper, whether that's a tool or an individual, but respect that chain that ultimately contacts and reaches out to your customer references. Now, after all this process stuff happens in terms of finding, requesting, fulfilling, then there's closing the loop.
And I think that's what everyone struggles to find and what helps validate your program. That's just having metrics to show executives, to show sales, to show marketing, to show your customer organization as well. And what are we doing? How are we influencing revenue? How are we growing the program and leveraging customers outside of what some people think is the tactical execution of a reference program? How many case studies are we pulling in? How many people are participating in speaking events and things like that you can really then grow into the holistic lifeblood of your program, and helps you build a case for growing your staff and having a larger team and help buy into different platforms that could help you facilitate references easier or create new content in a much more scalable way. I think that's the other part of this too, is one thing leads into the other, which then helps you grow your program, which helps you then facilitate easier references for other people, but it helps you then also find new ways to develop great references into something else. One-to-many case studies for people who are used too much, have them speak at events that you can record, and then maybe people start playing earlier on in the sales cycle to close things out and mitigate maybe a need for calls later on. It really does become one hand washing the other. If they're closing the loop using the process that you've built in, that really just makes everything just flow so much easier. I don't even know how, it's a well-oiled machine. Mm-hmm. And this is the final piece of grease to put in it.
Mm-hmm. So obviously you want to know if something happened or not. Why? Because you're tracking the number of uses against a particular reference contact. You might be issuing reward points, and that's important to take into account. You should train sales to debrief both the reference and the prospect. And I don't know, some of you probably have customer advocates who gladly and willingly share their debrief from their calls. So we get that all the time, which is really great and amazing on their part to take the extra time. From the prospect standpoint, you want to make sure that all their questions have been resolved and there's nothing hanging out there that you might need to find a different reference to ultimately resolve. It's, of course, important to show gratitude to customers. We believe strongly in that. It doesn't need to be you're going to get this number of points or this particular reward for doing something like telling them in advance, but certainly you should thank them for their time and the effort they put into it. And then lastly, we believe in telling our customer references that they actually did help in us closing a deal with a particular prospect. So I think that's one of the things that keeps them engaged and feeling good about spending the time doing what they did for you, is to know that they actually made a difference, not just a big question mark. I wonder what happened to that thing I did a month and a half ago or whatever. All right, so there's a couple things process-wise that involve technology that we wanted to cover with you. One is, this is kind of like training, inline training, if you will. So I have an example of Slack up right now, and Slack has a feature. This has nothing to do with our product, but you can set up an auto response. This goes to the tamping down the black market and also educating at the same time. So imagine I'm the requester here. I need a reference in financial services, et cetera, et cetera. Can anyone help? Well, in Slack, you can look for certain phrases. In this case, I need a reference was identified, and Slack will immediately respond, hey, you looking for a reference? If so, X, whatever that might be. In our case, we start our Slack bot app so that you can begin your search and everything from within Slack. But whatever the process is, call this number, send an email here, fill out this form, you can put that right in the response, which is really cool. So you catch them in process. You can't be everywhere, but a Slack bot can, and it can monitor any channels that you want in the system. Tony, of course, is with WalkMe, and so they use their own technology in a pretty compelling way.
And actually, David, we use Slack a bit too with that. We have a customer reference channel, and the Slack bot automatically points them to our Confluence page about our use case of Reference Edge and how to go through the appropriate channels. So it's kind of funny. It just melds right into it.
I love
But
it.
what you look at here is we took, like you said, we're using WalkMe for WalkMe. We're big into using our own technology. I like to think of it as sellers know how to sell, but they just know how to sell the way you want them to. So we have to meet them where they are. It's like I went to Iceland with my kids and my wife this summer, and I didn't know how to drive there because I don't speak Icelandic, but I do know how to listen to the GPS lady, and I do know how to drive on the right side of the road. So that worked out pretty great. And that's what this is here. So it's really just showing them, you're in stage 3. Here are the things that we know are appropriate for you to use at this juncture. This is going to help answer some questions that your prospect could have. And then we've built it out for multiple stages. So next stage 4, so we've kind of swapped out our logo slide and swapped in online reviews because that's building in more of the, the hard hitting, or they're going to have more questions at this point, and then looking at, now we're in stage 5 for us, which is where you're going to want to be submitting a proposal. You're having more of a far more nuts and bolts kind of conversation and brass tacks of it all. So that's where we're going to leverage submitting a customer reference request in Reference Edge. In fact, we've even gone a step farther and then a shout out to somebody once their opportunity, which is just an in-app message. It'd be like, hey, David, congratulations. Your opportunity for WalkMe is in stage 5. Would you like to request a customer reference? Yes, I would. And it takes them right to Reference Edge, ties it to their opportunity, and they can go through and make their triage selection of filterable attributes for the reference and start facilitating that reference call if needed. So we've really met sellers to facilitate the best use case, I feel like, of customer evidence. And I think I'm so excited about the way that we've leveraged this here. It's just kind of taking a lot of that guesswork and the remembering the training out of somebody's head. Like I said, I don't know how anyone could drive in a city they didn't live in before on vacation, before GPS. So really what WalkMe is, it's your GPS on your route. You know how to work Salesforce. You know how to click around. I'm just going to tell you what to do, make it super easy for you. And our sellers have really responded to the way we've done it. They've bought into the process. We've rolled it out just within the last couple of weeks, and we're already seeing really great feedback on how they're leveraging this and how they feel supported instead of taking the guesswork out of everything, which is awesome.
And know that there are other systems, Salesforce being one of them, and products like SalesLoft, and that they have guidance that you might be able to build these kinds of things into. All right, so the last thing we want to cover is, how do you position this? Like, how do you get 3 different audiences really on board with the idea of reference training? I'll take the first one, sales leadership. To them, meeting quota is the most important thing to sales leadership. So if you can explain to them how salespeople will be more efficient, not only in finding references, not in days or weeks, but in hours, that should lead to an accelerated sales cycle. Win rates, we know, improve when advocates are used effectively because decisions are made more quickly. There's also potentially pricing pressure that you can sort of shift off to the side because it's not important. The value has been proven in the use of customer advocates. So that's really the sales leadership angle. It's worth the time to spend.
And when you look at how do you position it to sellers, it really, to them, it just comes down to this makes your life so much easier. Whether we have way more references than you do in your back pocket, we can help you find those hard to find references. We can help you with best practices and best use cases for customer evidence outside of a reference call. We can bake this into your sales process to meet you where you are, make it a lot easier and make you look smarter. I think that helps sellers.
And then customer success, it's all about them not having to say no so many times. If there's a controlled process, the person with the marquee account doesn't get hit up 3 or 4 times a day for that same customer. That's kind of exhausting. There's also the protection from overuse of a particular customer reference. And the last thing is really, if they are doing all this work, these advocates, then you want to recognize them. The customer success manager is the best person to make that recognition, but they have to know, how many times someone's been used and for what, for them to be able to do that. And that means working through a process and respecting that relationship protocol. So we hope these are useful thoughts for you to craft your own customer reference training model and also to get the buy-in that you need to get the time allocated. So Tony and I will be happy to take your calls now, or in this case, it'll be messages, and answer any questions that you might have.
As the only 100% native reference management app for Salesforce, our solution lives where your salespeople live. This means that all your data and reference management functionality are hosted on Salesforce servers, managed in a world-class security infrastructure. There's just one familiar interface to use, which accelerates user adoption. Centralize all your reference assets. Search for relevant accounts and customer content. Automate reference account and content suggestions, the request process, and more. So say goodbye to that reference goat rodeo and say hello to Reference Edge.